Sit quietly. Respectable people are gathered here. My father whispered sharply, his hand tightening around my arm. Above the banquet table, the chandeliers shimmered like frozen stars. Laughter drifted through the Millionaires Gala, the yearly event my father liked to describe as his social battlefield. I sat beside him wearing a simple navy dress that apparently made me look like one of the staff. When I reached for my glass of water, Dad leaned toward the silver-haired CEO across from us and said with a forced laugh, "She is my foolish daughter. I apologize for her. My son is the real pride of our family." The table responded with polite laughter. My cheeks burned, but I gave a small smile, pretending it didn't hurt. Inside, however, the humiliation felt cold and heavy. The pride of the family, my brother Ryan, smiled as if he had earned the title simply by being there. He wore a suit that cost more than my entire month's rent. He didn't look at me once. I thought about standing up and leaving, but something made me stay. Tonight was not just another dinner. It was my event. For 6 months, I had been working quietly with the organizing committee, completely anonymous. They didn't even know I was my father's daughter. And now, as the host walked toward the microphone to introduce the keynote speaker, my father straightened proudly, expecting to hear his business partner's name. Instead, the lights dimmed. The screen behind the stage lit up with my photo. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer said, "please welcome the lead designer behind tonight's charity technology initiative, Miss Lena Ward." My father froze. The entire hall stood and applauded. The sound echoed across the grand room, sharp, rhythmic, undeniable. My father's fork slipped from his hand. My mother blinked in confusion and whispered, "Did he just say Lena?" I stood up, every heartbeat louder than the last. The host continued, "Miss Ward is the visionary behind the ISLE sustainability platform that raised more than $8 million in global donations this quarter, transforming how corporations contribute to charitable causes." Heads turned toward me. Phones lifted. Camera flashes flickered. For a moment, I saw my father's face, pale, mouth slightly open, eyes moving between me and the screen behind the stage where my credentials glowed in gold letters. I walked toward the podium. Each step felt like reclaiming years of silence. When I reached the microphone, the applause gradually faded into quiet. I smiled calmly, speaking with intention. "Good evening, everyone. It's an honor to finally meet the people behind the numbers we've been building for months. I never imagined that the girl once told to sit quietly would one day stand here speaking to all of you." Soft laughter moved through the audience, warm and genuine this time, not mocking. It sounded like recognition. I glanced toward my father's table. He wasn't clapping. His hands gripped his napkin as if it were the only thing holding his pride together. My brother avoided looking at me entirely. When I stepped down from the stage, the CEO my father had been trying to impress earlier stopped me. "You're his daughter?" he asked, clearly surprised. "Yes," I replied softly. "Though I think tonight he's still deciding if that's a good thing." The man laughed. "He should be proud. That presentation was excellent." I offered a small smile. "Maybe he will be someday." Behind me, my father still hadn't moved. The applause had continued without him. When I returned to the table, no one spoke. Even the quiet clinking of cutlery from nearby tables sounded loud against my family's sudden silence. Dad stared down at his plate. The confidence he had shown earlier, the loud laughter and constant bragging, had disappeared. He looked like someone caught off guard in front of an audience he never expected. My mother tried to restore the moment. "That was impressive, Lena," she said, her voice careful, almost rehearsed. Ryan leaned back in his chair and muttered, "You could have told us." I smiled politely. "You could have asked." His jaw tightened. "You embarrassed Dad in front of everyone." "I didn't embarrass him," I replied calmly. "He simply misjudged who he was sitting next to." Dad finally looked up. "This wasn't your place, Lena. You made me look like a fool." I met his eyes steadily. "No, Dad," I said. "You did that the moment you called. Me foolish in front of strangers." The words landed like glass breaking. The table beside ours had gone quiet, pretending not to listen, but clearly hearing every word. Then the event coordinator approached with a professional smile. "Miss Ward, the press would like a brief interview. They're especially interested in your partnership with Harper Tecca's Green Energy Division." The irony was immediate. Harper Tecca was the very company my father had spent months trying to secure a meeting with. I glanced at him once more. His face showed disbelief and something I had never noticed before: fear. "Of course," I told the coordinator as I stood. "I'd be happy to." And for the first time, my father didn't tell me to sit quietly. He couldn't. The flashing lights in the press area felt unusual. For years, I had remained in the background of my father's world. Now I was standing in front of the same cameras that once ignored me. "Miss Ward," a reporter began, "your platform has been described as the most impactful philanthropic technology innovation of the year. How did you create something that outperformed 3 corporate think tanks?" I smiled, controlled but sincere. "By not underestimating the people who are usually overlooked." The reporter tilted his head slightly. "Anyone specific?" I held his gaze calmly. "Let's just say that sometimes you have to be called foolish before you realize how capable you truly are." Several journalists exchanged knowing looks. The message had reached exactly where I intended. Within hours, the interview spread online. By morning, major outlets carried headlines such as "Daughter Silenced at Gala Becomes Unexpected Star of the Evening," and "Tech Visionary Lena Ward Leaves Corporate Elites Speechless." Back home, my father's phone was flooded with calls from investors who now wanted me involved in future projects. The next evening, I stopped by the family estate to drop off documents from the foundation. The atmosphere inside was uncomfortably quiet. Mom was arranging flowers that clearly didn't need rearranging. Ryan sat scrolling through his phone, pretending not to notice me. Dad eventually stepped out of his study. He looked slower, smaller, and his voice was lower than I had ever heard before. "You humiliated me," he said, not angrily, but with something worse: injured pride. "No," I replied gently. "I showed them who I am. You just never believed that would be someone worth noticing." He didn't respond. He simply turned away. And for the first time, it wasn't me who seemed small in that house. A week passed before I heard from my father again. No calls, no messages, only a cream-colored envelope slipped under my apartment door early one morning. It was his handwriting, precise and controlled, the same style he used for business contracts. Inside was a short letter. "Lena, I said things I can't take back. I believed strength meant control, and that appearances mattered more than authenticity. Watching that room stand for you reminded me of who I used to be before ego replaced gratitude. You've become everything I failed to be, not only successful, but respected. Dad." I sat there for a long time, the letter trembling in my hands. I had waited my entire life for his approval, and now that I finally had it, the feeling wasn't triumphant. It was sad. That evening I met Daniel, the gala coordinator, for coffee. Over time, he had become a quiet friend through everything. "You're not celebrating," he said, noticing the letter beside my cup. I shrugged slightly. "I thought recognition would fix the pain. It doesn't. It only makes it louder before it fades." He smiled faintly. "It's not about fixing it, Lena. It's about realizing you don't need their applause anymore." The next morning, I framed the letter, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. People can change, but usually only when reality breaks through pride. And for the first time, my father didn't need a stage or an audience to see me. He finally saw me in silence. 2 weeks later, my phone buzzed with a message that made me pause mid-meeting. "Dad, Sunday dinner. Just family. I'll cook." I almost laughed. My father, the man who believed kitchens were meant for staff, was cooking. Still, curiosity won. That evening, I drove to the estate, the same house where I had once felt invisible at every table. When I arrived, the dining room looked different, smaller, somehow warmer. My mother had replaced her diamond-bright centerpiece with simple candles. My brother Ryan avoided eye contact but gave a stiff nod. Then my father walked out of the kitchen wearing an apron. "Lasagna," he said with awkward pride. "It's probably terrible." It wasn't. It was imperfect, uneven, and slightly burned around the edges, and it was the most human thing I had ever seen him do. During dinner, he cleared his throat. "I spoke to the board. We're donating half of my shares in Ward Enterprises to your foundation." I paused. "You don't have to." "I do." He replied quietly. "You showed me what real value looks like. Not profit, not reputation, purpose." Mom offered a small smile. "Your father has been reading every article about you." Ryan muttered. "Yeah, he even cried during one of them." Ryan, Dad warned, though his tone was gentle this time. For the first time in my life, we weren't performing roles. We were simply a family, imperfect, scarred, and finally honest. When dinner ended, Dad walked me to the door. "I still wish I had said this sooner," he admitted. "I'm proud of you, Lena." And for the first time, I believed him. A month later, I was back in my office when my phone rang. My mother's voice was trembling. "Your father collapsed," during a board meeting. "He's stable now, but the doctors say he needs rest." I drove straight to the hospital. Seeing him connected to machines unsettled me more than I expected. The man who once seemed indestructible now appeared small, human, and vulnerable. He smiled weakly when he saw me. "Don't look so worried, kiddo. I'm not going anywhere just yet." Then he handed me a sealed folder. "Open this if anything ever happens to me. Promise me." "Don't talk like that," I whispered, holding his hand tightly. He closed his eyes for a moment. "I've made peace with many things, thanks to you." He recovered slowly, and life returned to a strange but careful normal routine. Then one afternoon, his lawyer asked me to come in. "Your father updated his will," he said gently. "He wanted you to know before the rest of the family." When I opened the document, I struggled to breathe. Half of Ward Enterprises, the same company I was once considered unworthy of, was now in my name. The lawyer continued, "He also transferred ownership of the family estate to your foundation. He said he wanted the place to represent something meaningful again, not just personal pride." That evening, I visited my father. He was reading quietly, his favorite pen tucked neatly into his shirt pocket. "You gave me everything," I said softly. He smiled. "No, Lena, you gave me back my conscience." For the first time, the space between us felt light, as if the weight of years of disappointment had finally disappeared. 6 months later, Ward Enterprises hosted its annual charity gala, the same banquet where I had once been told to sit quietly. Only this time, I wasn't standing in the background. The host introduced me as Lena Ward, CEO of the Ward Foundation and Innovator of the Year. The same chandeliers sparkled above us. The same guests filled the hall. But the applause that followed my name wasn't polite, it was overwhelming. As I stepped onto the stage, I saw my father seated in the front row. His eyes were wet, and he was clapping harder than anyone else. My mother quietly wiped her eyes beside him. Even Ryan looked proud, genuinely proud. I spoke calmly, my voice steady despite the emotion rising in my chest. I was once told to remain silent because respectable people were present. I believed that for too long. Then I realized that respect isn't something you are simply given. It's something you earn by standing tall, even when others try to make you feel small. The entire room rose to its feet, a standing ovation that felt like closure, like vindication, like peace. Afterward, Dad hugged me in front of everyone. "You were never my foolish daughter," he whispered. "I was the foolish father who couldn't see you." Outside the hotel, the cool night air brushed against my face. I looked up at the city skyline. The world finally felt quiet. The journey had never been about humiliating anyone. It was about reclaiming the voice that others once tried to silence and using it to create something meaningful. And as I walked toward my car, the applause still echoing behind me, I realized that the respect I had fought for was finally mine, because I had earned it on my own.